He called her a disgrace in front of his rich friends, then left her with a $5,000 bill. The champagne was Dom Perignon. The chandeliers were Swarovski crystal. The guests were worth a combined $40 billion. And Natasha Cole stood frozen in the center of it all, watching her husband of 6 years destroy everything she thought they had built together. "You are an embarrassment to my legacy, Natasha." Carter Blackwell's voice carried across the grand ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel, cutting through the soft orchestra music like a blade through silk. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. 200 of Atlanta's wealthiest power players now had front-row seats to the unraveling of her marriage. The charity gala had cost $12,000 per plate. Carter had insisted she attend, demanded she wear the emerald Valentino gown he'd selected, required her to smile and nod while he networked with investors who looked through her like she was part of the furniture. And now, he was looking at her too, but not through her, at her, with contempt so thick she could taste it in the back of her throat like copper. "Look at yourself," he continued, gesturing at her with his champagne flute. "You used to have potential. You used to be interesting. Now what are you? A woman who wastes her days at that little community health project like she's still some graduate student instead of my wife. If you have ever been in a relationship where you felt invisible, where your accomplishments were dismissed as hobbies, where the person who was supposed to love you made you feel smaller every single day, I need you to hit that like button right now, because this story, it's for you. And trust me, you're going to want to stay until the end to see what happens next." Natasha's hands trembled at her sides. She could feel the weight of 200 stares pressing against her skin. Marjorie Kensington, whose husband's hedge fund had just invested $30 million in Carter's tech company, covered her mouth with a manicured hand. Preston Drake, the venture capitalist who'd been Carter's mentor, looked away with something that might have been shame or might have been agreement. But it was the woman standing slightly behind Carter who made Natasha's stomach drop. Sienna Monroe, 26 years old, officially Carter's brand strategist, unofficially the reason he'd been working late every night for the past 8 months. Sienna was smiling, just barely, just enough for Natasha to see. Carter wasn't finished. "The problem with you, Natasha, is that you have no vision. You could have been somebody. You have a PhD, for God's sake. But instead of using it to build something meaningful, you waste it on people who will never amount to anything, handing out pamphlets about diabetes, teaching poor women how to breastfeed." His laugh was sharp and cold. "That's not ambition, sweetheart. That's charity work for someone who doesn't know what else to do with her life." The orchestra had stopped playing. The servers had stopped moving. Even the ice sculptures seemed to be holding their breath. Natasha opened her mouth to respond, but Carter held up his hand. "Don't. I'm done listening to your excuses. I'm done pretending that your little projects matter. And I'm done carrying dead weight." He straightened his Tom Ford tuxedo jacket and turned to address the crowd with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this scene. My wife isn't feeling well. I think it's time she went home." He pulled out his phone, checked the time with theatrical precision, and delivered the final blow. "Our table tonight cost $60,000. I've already taken care of my portion. Natasha, I trust you can handle the rest. Consider it your contribution to a cause you actually understand." And then Carter Blackwell, the man she had loved for 6 years, the man she had married believing he saw her for who she truly was, walked away. Sienna followed 3 steps behind, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. Natasha stood alone in a ballroom full of people worth billions, with a $12,000 bill in her name and a marriage that had just ended somewhere between the appetizer course and the main event. But here's the thing about Natasha Cole that Carter had somehow forgotten, or maybe he had never truly known it at all. She wasn't the woman he thought she was. She was so much more. To understand how Natasha ended up frozen in that ballroom, we need to go back to who she was before Carter Blackwell ever walked into her life and convinced her that his version of success was the only one that mattered. 7 years ago, Dr. Natasha Cole was on fire, not metaphorically, professionally. She had just completed her PhD in public health from Emory University, graduating at the top of her class with a dissertation on maternal mortality in underserved communities that was already being cited by researchers around the world. The CDC had offered her a position. Johns Hopkins had come calling. The World Health Organization had sent representatives to her graduation. At 29 years old, Natasha was exactly where she wanted to be, running a community health initiative in South Atlanta that served over 3,000 families, training the next generation of public health workers, publishing research that actually changed policy. Her mother used to say that Natasha had been born with a compass in her chest, that she always knew exactly which direction she needed to go, even when the path wasn't clear to anyone else. Then she met Carter. It was at a fundraiser. Ironically enough, Natasha had been invited to speak about her work reducing infant mortality rates in food desert neighborhoods. Carter had been one of the donors, though she hadn't known that at the time. She just knew that a tall, impossibly handsome man in a suit that cost more than her monthly rent had approached her after her presentation with genuine curiosity in his eyes. "Tell me more about what you do," he'd said. And unlike most wealthy donors who asked that question, he actually listened to her answer. For 6 months, Carter Blackwell was everything Natasha had never known she wanted. Attentive, supportive, fascinated by her work in a way that felt almost too good to be true. He attended her community events. He donated generously to her programs. He introduced her to his friends as the most brilliant woman I've ever met. When he proposed, Natasha said yes without hesitation. How could she not? This man saw her, really saw her, or so she thought. The change didn't happen overnight. It never does. First, it was the suggestions. "Maybe you should consider stepping back from the day-to-day operations, sweetheart. You're exhausted. Let someone else handle the field work while you focus on the big picture." Then, it was the observations. "I noticed you've been spending a lot of time with your old colleagues. Don't you think you've outgrown them a bit? We're building a different kind of life now." Then, it was the requests. "I have an important dinner on Thursday. I'd really appreciate it if you could skip the community meeting this week. These investors are crucial to the company's growth, and I need you by my side." Then it was the criticisms. "That dress makes you look like you're still working at a nonprofit. We're in a different tax bracket now, Natasha. You need to look the part." Then it was the isolation. "I don't think your friend Imani is a good influence. She's still stuck in that academic bubble. You need to surround yourself with people who think bigger." Then it was the erasure. "Do you really need to keep working at the center? It's not like we need the money. Wouldn't you rather focus on supporting my career, on building our life together?" Natasha had been so in love that she couldn't see what was happening. Or maybe she could see it, but she convinced herself it was compromise, sacrifice, what marriage required. Within 3 years, she had stepped down from her position at the community health center. She had lost touch with Dr. Imani Ross, her mentor and closest friend. She had stopped publishing research. She had stopped speaking at conferences. She had stopped being Dr. Natasha Cole entirely. She had become Mrs. Carter Blackwell, and Mrs. Carter Blackwell's only job was to make Carter Blackwell look good. The compass in her chest had stopped working. Or maybe she had just stopped listening to it. Until tonight. The ballroom was still buzzing with whispered conversations when Natasha finally moved. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else as she walked, not toward the exit, but toward the table where Carter had left her with the bill. "Mrs. Blackwell," the event coordinator approached her with obvious discomfort. "Shall I have someone call you a car? Or perhaps settle the remaining balance for your table?" Natasha looked at the woman, looked at the table with its half-empty champagne flutes and abandoned dessert plates, looked at the curious faces of Atlanta's elite, all watching to see what the disgraced wife would do next. "What's the total?" she asked. Her voice was steady, steadier than she felt. $12,400, ma'am." Mr. Blackwell covered his portion, "but the remaining balance for your party." The coordinator trailed off, clearly hoping Natasha would pull out a credit card and make this uncomfortable situation disappear. But something had shifted inside Natasha, something that felt like a door slamming shut and another one opening wide. "I didn't order that wine," she said, pointing to the remains of a bottle that cost more than most people's monthly car payments. "And I didn't select the chef's tasting menu for the table. My husband made those choices. My soon-to-be ex-husband, I should say." The coordinator's eyes widened. Natasha turned to address the watching crowd. Her voice carried across the ballroom, with the same clarity she had once used to command lecture halls and community forums. "Mr. and Mrs. Kensington, Mr. Drake, everyone who witnessed what just happened here tonight, I want you to know something about the man you've invested in. The man you've trusted with your money and your reputation. She paused, letting the silence build. Carter Blackwell just abandoned his wife of 6 years with a restaurant bill because she dared to have a career that wasn't about making him richer. He called my work an embarrassment because I chose to help mothers and babies survive instead of optimizing his stock portfolio. She looked directly at Marjorie Kensington. Ask yourselves what that tells you about his character, about his loyalty, about what he'll do when you're no longer useful to him. The room was absolutely silent. Natasha picked up her clutch purse and smiled. A real smile. The first genuine smile she'd felt on her face in months. The bill tonight is Carter's responsibility. Just like everything else, he's broken. When his company contacts you about your investments tomorrow, I suggest you ask some hard questions about where your money has actually been going. She walked out of the ballroom with her head high, leaving $12,000 in unpaid bills and 200 stunned socialites in her wake. Outside, the October air hit her face like a splash of cold water. She was shaking now. The adrenaline that had carried her through that moment was fading, leaving her raw and exposed. She called an Uber with trembling fingers, and as she waited on the steps of the Whitmore Hotel, watching Atlanta's skyline glitter against the night sky, she made a decision. She was done being Mrs. Carter Blackwell. It was time to remember who Dr. Natasha Cole really was. Now, I need you to drop a comment below. Should Natasha have paid that bill to save face and avoid drama? Or did she do exactly the right thing by walking away and letting Carter deal with the consequences of his own behavior? Let me know what you think, because the story is about to get a whole lot more intense. The penthouse was dark when Natasha arrived home. 23 floors above the city, 3,000 square feet of Italian marble and floor-to-ceiling windows that Carter had selected without once asking her opinion. She had never felt comfortable here. Too cold, too perfect, too much like living inside a magazine spread instead of an actual home. But tonight, the darkness felt different, heavy with absence. She flicked on the lights and saw it immediately. Carter's closet was half empty. His suits, gone. His watch collection, gone. The photograph of his parents that usually sat on his nightstand, gone. He hadn't just humiliated her at the gala. He had planned this, every moment of it. The public scene, the bill, the dramatic exit. It had all been calculated to happen exactly as it did, while he had already packed his bags and prepared his escape. Natasha's legs gave out. She sank onto the edge of their bed, her emerald gown pooling around her like a fallen leaf, and tried to process what she was seeing. On his pillow sat an envelope with her name written across it in Carter's precise handwriting. Inside was a letter, typed, because even now Carter couldn't be bothered to write something by hand. Natasha, by the time you read this, I will have relocated to the downtown loft. Our marriage has become incompatible with my vision for the future. I trust you understand that this is a business decision as much as a personal one. My attorney will be in contact regarding the dissolution of our partnership. I recommend you secure your own counsel. For what it's worth, I did care about you once, but you stopped being the woman I married a long time ago. You stopped growing. You stopped wanting more. I can't afford to be held back by someone who has settled for mediocrity. The penthouse is in my name. You have 60 days to find alternative arrangements. Regards, Carter. Regards. He had signed their divorce announcement with regards. Like she was a business associate he was cutting loose after an unproductive quarter. Natasha read the letter 3 times. Then she set it down carefully and did something that surprised even herself. She laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so completely, perfectly Carter. Even now, even in the act of betraying her, he couldn't resist positioning himself as the reasonable one, the visionary, the man who had simply outgrown his disappointing wife. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. Natasha stood up, kicked off her heels, and began moving through the penthouse with purpose. She photographed everything, every document in his home office, every bank statement she could find, every suspicious receipt and credit card bill. Carter had always handled their finances. He'd said it was because he was better with numbers, and she had believed him. But now, flipping through months of statements, she saw patterns that made her blood run cold. Large transfers to accounts she didn't recognize, charges at jewelry stores she had never visited, monthly payments to a luxury apartment building downtown, The same building, she realized with a sick feeling, where he had said he was relocating. He had been paying for that apartment for over a year. Sienna's apartment. It had to be. There were other things too. Withdrawals from their joint investment accounts that she had never authorized. Credit cards opened in her name that she had never seen. A web of financial manipulation so complex it would take a forensic accountant to fully unravel. Carter hadn't just been planning to leave her. He had been systematically stripping away every asset, every protection, every safety net she had. By the time she finished photographing everything, it was nearly 4 a.m. Her hands were cramped, her eyes burned, but she had what she needed. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she hadn't called in over 2 years. Kendall Morrison, criminal defense attorney turned family law specialist. The woman Natasha had met during her public health work, representing domestic violence survivors in custody battles. The friend Carter had called too aggressive and encouraged her to drop. Natasha had been so stupid, so blind. The phone rang twice before a sleepy voice answered. This better be important. It's 4 a.m. Kendall, it's Natasha Cole. I need your help. A pause. Then, fully awake now, Natasha, my God. I haven't heard from you in years. What's going on? My husband just publicly humiliated me at a charity gala, abandoned me with a $12,000 bill, and I've just discovered he's been financially defrauding me for at least a year, probably longer. Another pause. Longer this time. How soon can you get to my office? I can be there in 3 hours. Make it 2. And Natasha, yes, don't let him back in that penthouse. Change the locks tonight, if you have to, and whatever you do, do not engage with him directly. From this moment on, everything goes through me. Natasha hung up the phone and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Kendall Morrison's office was located in a converted Victorian house in Midtown Atlanta, all exposed brick and warm wood that felt nothing like the sterile corporate spaces Carter preferred. Natasha arrived just as the sun was coming up, still wearing her gala gown under a hastily grabbed coat, looking like a woman who had either just left a party or just survived a war. Kendall took one look at her and handed her a cup of coffee strong enough to strip paint. Tell me everything. So Natasha did. The gala, the humiliation, the letter, the financial records she'd photographed, all of it poured out in a rush of words that she couldn't have stopped if she tried. Kendall listened without interrupting, her legal pad filling with notes, her expression growing darker with every new detail. When Natasha finally fell silent, Kendall set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. Carter Blackwell is going to regret the day he decided to mess with you. You think we have a case. A case. Kendall laughed, but there was no humor in it. Natasha, what you've described isn't just grounds for divorce. It's financial abuse, fraud, potentially criminal activity, depending on what we find when we dig deeper into those accounts. But he's powerful. He has connections everywhere. His investors, his lawyers, his what? Kendall leaned forward. Money, influence, a PR team that can spin any story. I've seen it all before, Natasha, and I've beaten it all before. The thing about men like Carter is that they always underestimate their victims. They spend so long convincing you that you're powerless, they start to believe their own lie. Natasha felt tears prick at her eyes. For the first time in years, someone was telling her that she wasn't crazy, that what she had experienced was real, that she had the right to fight back. The first thing we're going to do, Kendall continued, is freeze every joint asset before he can move anything else. Then we're going to file for divorce on grounds of financial abuse and adultery. And then, she smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had spent her entire career fighting for the underdog. We're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man Carter Blackwell really is. Natasha thought about all the years she had spent making herself smaller, all the dreams she had abandoned, all the friends she had lost, all the pieces of herself she had given away to a man who had never deserved any of them. What do I need to do? 2 things. First, we secure your foundation, your finances, your housing, your support system. And second, Kendall's eyes met hers with fierce determination. We remind you of who you were before Carter Blackwell ever got his hands on you. That afternoon, Natasha made another call she had been avoiding for years. Dr. Imani Ross answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting. Natasha, her mentor's voice was warm and unsurprised. I was wondering when you'd call. You knew. I suspected. A woman doesn't disappear from a career she loves, from friends who care about her, from everything she's worked for, without a reason. I just hoped you'd find your way back before too much damage was done. Natasha's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I disappeared. I'm so sorry I let him. Stop. Imani's voice was gentle but firm. You don't need to apologize to me. Not ever. What you need to do is remember who you are. And as luck would have it, I have a reminder for you. What do you mean? Your research on maternal mortality in underserved communities. The work you did before you met him. It's still cited in every major paper on the subject. The policy changes you helped implement are still saving lives. And the Global Health Alliance, the organization that offered you a position 7 years ago that you turned down for him, they just lost their director of community engagement last month. Natasha's heart stopped. They've been asking about you, Natasha, wondering if you might be interested in finally taking that position, the one you were born for. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. For 6 years, Carter had convinced her that her work didn't matter, that her accomplishments were small, that her dreams were embarrassing, and all along, the world had kept turning. Her research had kept mattering. People had kept dying, and other people had kept fighting to save them, using tools that Natasha had helped create. She hadn't disappeared. She had just been buried, and now it was time to dig herself out. If you're watching this, and you're realizing that you have buried parts of yourself for someone who didn't deserve them, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next, the comeback, the revelation, the moment when everything changes, you're not going to want to miss a single second. The next 3 weeks were a blur of legal filings, financial audits, and late nights spent rediscovering parts of herself she had almost forgotten existed. Kendall moved with the precision of a surgeon. She froze the joint accounts before Carter could drain them further. She filed for divorce on grounds of financial abuse and adultery, citing specific transactions and a timeline of deception. She retained a forensic accountant who began unraveling the web of Carter's financial manipulation, revealing fraud that went far deeper than Natasha had imagined. Meanwhile, Natasha began rebuilding her professional life. She met with Dr. Imani Ross and her former colleagues at Emory. She reviewed the research she had abandoned, amazed at how much of it was still relevant. She started returning to the community health center where she had once made such a difference, volunteering first, then consulting, then slowly stepping back into the role that had always been hers. The Global Health Alliance formally offered her the Director of Community Engagement position. The salary was nearly 3 times what she had made before. The scope was international. The impact would be measured in millions of lives. Natasha said yes, but Carter wasn't going down without a fight. 3 weeks after the gala, his counterattack began. First came the legal response. His attorneys filed a motion claiming that Natasha had abandoned the marriage, not him, that she had been mentally unstable and prone to public outbursts, as witnessed by her behavior at the charity event, that the financial transactions she had flagged were legitimate business investments that she simply didn't understand because she had never shown interest in his career. Then came the social media campaign. Carter's PR team began seeding stories in Atlanta's society circles. Poor Carter, betrayed by his ungrateful wife. Did you hear she left him with a $12,000 bill in front of all those people? She was always difficult, always jealous of his success. He's better off without her. Then came the personal attacks. Natasha found herself uninvited from events she had once attended regularly. Former friends stopped returning her calls. Women who had smiled at her for years now looked through her with the same blank expressions Carter's investors had worn that night at the gala. Worst of all, Carter started spreading rumors about her mental health, suggesting that she was having a breakdown, that she was making up stories about financial abuse because she couldn't accept that her marriage had failed, that she was vindictive and dangerous and not to be trusted. Natasha felt the walls closing in. Every direction she turned, Carter was there. His money, his influence, his ability to shape the narrative. For one terrible moment, she considered giving up, accepting whatever settlement he offered just to make it stop, disappearing into a quiet life somewhere far from Atlanta and everyone who had witnessed her humiliation. Then she remembered something her mother had told her years ago, before she died. The compass in your chest, baby girl, it doesn't point toward easy. It points toward true. and true is almost never the same thing as comfortable. Natasha's compass was pointing toward true, and true meant fighting back. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Kendall called her on a Tuesday morning with news that changed everything. "We found something," her lawyer said, and Natasha could hear the barely contained excitement in her voice. "Something big." "What is it?" "Carter's company, Blackwell Technologies. The one he's been telling investors is worth $900 million. It's built on fraud." Natasha sat down heavily. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he's been using investor money to fund his personal lifestyle. The apartment for his mistress, the art collection, the yacht he bought last year. It's all been expensed as business investments when it's actually just, well, theft." There was more. The forensic accountant had traced funds from investor accounts directly into payments for Sienna Monroe, who wasn't just Carter's brand strategist. She was a shell company, literally. Carter had incorporated a consulting firm in her name and been paying her hundreds of thousands of dollars in fake consulting fees, money that came from people who trusted him with their retirement savings, their children's college funds, their life earnings. "The SEC has already opened a quiet investigation," Kendall continued. "Carter doesn't know it yet, but his world is about to collapse." Natasha thought about all the investors she had met over the years, the Kensingtons, Preston Drake, dozens of others who had trusted Carter because he was charming and confident and seemed to know exactly what he was doing. They had trusted him, just like she had. "There's something else," Kendall said. "Something about Sienna." "What?" "She's pregnant." Or, she was. There was a medical bill in the financial records, a pregnancy, and then a procedure. "The dates suggest that the affair started before you and Carter were even married." The words hit Natasha like a physical blow. He had been cheating on her from the beginning. The entire foundation of their marriage, every moment she thought was real, had been built on betrayal. But instead of devastation, she felt something else rising in her chest. Clarity. She had spent 6 years blaming herself, wondering what she had done wrong, trying to figure out how to be better, how to be more, how to be enough for a man who had never intended to be faithful. It had never been about her. It had always been about him. "What do we do now?" she asked. Kendall's voice was fierce. "Now we burn it all down." Natasha Cole's return to public life began quietly. A presentation at a community health conference, a consulting project with her old center, a few carefully placed interviews about her work in maternal health. But the tide was turning. The Atlanta Business Journal reached out for a profile on female leaders in public health. Then Forbes called, working on a story about women who had sacrificed careers for marriages and then reclaimed them. Then, a local news station asked her to comment on healthcare disparities in underserved communities. Each interview gave her a platform, and Natasha used every single one. She didn't attack Carter directly. She didn't have to. She simply told the truth about her own experience, about the gradual erosion of her identity, about the financial manipulation she had discovered, about the isolation and criticism disguised as love. The response was overwhelming. Women began reaching out to her. Of them, women who had experienced similar patterns in their own relationships. Women who had given up careers and friendships and dreams for men who didn't deserve them. Women who saw themselves in Natasha's story and felt, for the first time, that they weren't alone. A hashtag started trending. Stand with Natasha. Then another. Recognize the pattern. Then another. Financial abuse is real abuse. The viral moment came when Natasha was invited to speak at the Southern Women in Leadership Summit. 3,000 people in the audience. Another 50,000 watching online. She stood at that podium and told her story. Not as a victim, but as a survivor. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. She talked about recognizing the signs of emotional manipulation, about understanding that success requiring you to diminish yourself isn't success at all, about the power of reclaiming your own narrative. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. By the time she walked off that stage, her inbox was flooded with interview requests, job offers, and speaking invitations. Forbes ran their feature with the headline, "The Public Health Visionary Who Refused to Disappear." The Today Show wanted her for a segment on recognizing financial abuse in relationships. And Carter Blackwell's world was crumbling. His investors had seen the headlines. They had connected the dots between Natasha's story and their own unanswered questions about where their money was going. The Kensingtons pulled out first, then Preston Drake, then like dominoes. Everyone else. Blackwell Technologies' valuation dropped 40% in a single week. The SEC investigation went public, and Sienna Monroe, seeing the writing on the wall, quietly moved out of the downtown apartment and stopped returning Carter's calls. He had built his entire identity on the appearance of success, on the perception of being untouchable. And now, piece by piece, it was all falling apart. The confrontation happened on a Thursday afternoon, 3 months after the gala. Natasha was in her new office, a beautiful space in the Global Health Alliance's Atlanta headquarters with a view of the city skyline, when her assistant announced that someone was demanding to see her. She knew who it was before the door opened. Carter Blackwell looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 3 months. His suit was rumpled. His hair was uncombed. The smooth confidence that had always been his armor was cracked and peeling. "We need to talk," he said. Natasha remained seated behind her desk. "Whatever you have to say can go through my attorney." "Your attorney?" His laugh was bitter. "Your attorney is destroying my life." "No, Carter, you destroyed your own life. I just stopped helping you hide it." He moved closer, and Natasha felt a flicker of the old fear. The instinct to make herself smaller, to de-escalate, to manage his emotions so he wouldn't get angry. She let the fear pass through her. She didn't move. "The SEC is investigating me," he said. "The investors are gone. The company is worthless. Sienna left." His voice cracked. "I have nothing, Natasha. Nothing. And you came here because I need you to call it off. Tell the reporters you exaggerated. Tell the SEC we had a misunderstanding. You can fix this if you want to." Natasha stared at the man she had once loved, the man she had given 6 years of her life to, the man who had stood in a ballroom full of people and called her an embarrassment to his legacy. He looked so small now, so desperate, so completely ordinary. "I haven't done anything to you, Carter," she said quietly. "I told the truth about my experience. I shared my story with women who needed to hear it. If your company is falling apart, it's because you built it on lies. If the SEC is investigating you, it's because you stole from people who trusted you. None of that has anything to do with me." "That's not true." He stepped closer, and now there was something dangerous in his eyes. "You planned this. You've been planning to destroy me since that night at the gala." "I didn't plan anything. I survived. There's a difference. Survive." His voice rose. "You call this surviving. You've taken everything from me. My reputation, my company, my future. You've made me look like a monster. You made yourself look like a monster, Carter. I just stopped covering for you." He lunged forward, and for a moment, Natasha thought he might actually try to hurt her. But she had already pressed the security button under her desk, and 2 guards appeared in her doorway within seconds. "Mr. Blackwell," one of them stepped forward. "We're going to need you to leave." Carter looked at the guards, looked at Natasha, looked at the office that represented everything she had built without him, everything she had become since he threw her away. "You'll regret this," he said. His voice was empty now, defeated. "When you're alone, when you realize what you've thrown away, you'll regret this." Natasha stood up, and when she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. "The only thing I regret is the 6 years I spent believing I needed you to be whole. I was always whole, Carter. You just made me forget for a while." Security escorted him out, and as the door closed behind him, Natasha felt something she hadn't expected. Peace, not triumph, not satisfaction, just a quiet, profound peace. It was over, and she was finally free. 1 year later, Natasha Cole stood at the window of her new home, a craftsman bungalow in Virginia Highland with a garden and too many books and absolutely nothing that reminded her of Carter Blackwell. Outside, the October morning was crisp and golden. Inside, coffee was brewing, and her dog, a rescue mutt named Compass, was watching her with patient eyes. So much had changed. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. Kendall had secured a settlement that reflected the true extent of Carter's financial abuse. Half of everything, plus damages, plus a public acknowledgement of his wrongdoing that had made headlines for a week. The Global Health Alliance had promoted her twice. She was now leading a $50 million initiative on maternal health that spanned 3 continents and was projected to save thousands of lives annually. Her book, Reclaiming Your Worth, had spent 12 weeks on the bestseller list. And Carter, Carter had pleaded no contest to 3 counts of securities fraud. His company had been dissolved. He was working now, she'd heard, for someone else's firm in Dallas, stripped of the empire he had built on other people's trust and money. The bill from the gala, the $12,000 he had left her with that night, had gone to collections with his name on it, not hers. A small victory, but a satisfying one. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, the kind, thoughtful architect she had been seeing for the past few months. Nothing serious yet. They were both taking their time, learning to trust again. "Dinner tonight? I found a new Ethiopian place I think you'll love." She smiled. "Sounds perfect. Pick me up at 7. Compass barked, reminding her that morning walks waited for no one, and Natasha laughed as she grabbed her coat and headed for the door. She thought about that woman in the emerald gown, frozen in the center of a ballroom, while her husband called her a disgrace. She thought about how lost she had felt, how small, how certain that her life was over. She wished she could go back and tell that woman what she knew now, that the ending of one story is always the beginning of another, that the people who try to diminish you are always the ones most afraid of your light, that the compass in your chest never stops working, you just have to learn to trust it again. Natasha Cole had been called a disgrace in front of 200 of Atlanta's wealthiest power players. She had been abandoned, with a bill she couldn't pay, and a marriage that was nothing but lies. And she had turned all of it into a foundation strong enough to build a life she actually wanted to live. Not because she was special, not because she was lucky, but because she made a choice. The choice to stop believing someone else's definition of her worth. The choice to fight for herself, even when the odds seemed impossible. The choice to rebuild from the ground up, brick by brick, truth by truth, until she was standing on a foundation that no one could ever take away. That's the lesson of Natasha's story, and it's available to every single person watching this right now. You are not defined by how someone else treats you. You are not limited by what someone else believes you can achieve. You are not stuck in the story someone else is trying to tell about your life. You have a compass inside you, and it will always point toward true. All you have to do is start listening. If this story moved you, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that like button and let me know this message reached you. Second, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who might be stuck in their own version of Natasha's story and doesn't know yet that there's a way out. And third, subscribe to this channel if you want more stories like this, stories about people who refused to stay broken, who fought back against impossible odds, and who proved that it's never too late to become who you were always meant to be. Your engagement helps these messages reach the people who need them most, and you never know whose life might be changed by a story they weren't expecting to hear. Until next time, remember, your worth isn't determined by anyone else's perception. It's determined by your own choices, your own actions, your own refusal to accept anything less than you deserve. Now go out there and start building something beautiful.